Welcome. I'm Eric Malinowski, co-president of SOMA Action, and joining me will also be Stan Varon, one of our executive committee members, to ask questions. SOMA Action is a grassroots organization dedicated to driving progressive change. And as part of that, we put out a voter guide for every election, interviewing and evaluating candidates about their support for the issues our committees are working on. Please note that questions are restricted to the areas where our committees are active, so there are some important issues we don't cover, and we hope that voters will seek out candidates and learn more. Today, we're joined by Zach Beecher, a candidate for New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. Zach, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, Erica. Stan, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Could you please introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for Congress?
I'd be glad to. I grew up here. I grew up in Randolph, New Jersey. My parents actually still live in the house that I grew up in. I was the son of a police officer, served for 36 and a half years and retired as the chief of police in Mount Olive. But he actually started his career as a social worker. And my mom has been a social worker really since she graduated college at 20 and founded her nonprofit in 94 that's grown from 3 social workers to over 60. And you can imagine that for me, growing up in that environment, the kitchen table talk was around service. And for me, that really helped position service as a calling. I knew that there was really no higher calling and no more urgent one than to be solving the challenges that families like ours and families that we served were navigating every day. And so I was lucky enough and privileged enough to get an ROTC scholarship to attend Princeton University. And after Princeton, had a chance on graduation day actually to commission into the U.S. Army. The Army heard that I had a fear of heights and chose to disabuse me of that by sending me down to the 82nd Airborne Division, where I became a paratrooper. And as a paratrooper, I had the privilege of leading soldiers and service members from across this country. And I'm extraordinarily proud of the strength that we found in working together and the difference of backgrounds and experiences that we were able to draw forward and make us stronger in the process. I deployed forward in 2016, 2017 to lead an advise and assist team in Iraq, in Mosul. And the focus was on liberating Mosul, a city of 1.8 million people, from really the carnage of ISIS, who at the time was ruling the city. And we worked hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with our Iraqi counterparts in order to make sure that they had what they needed, where they needed it, and how they needed it. And we're able to really fundamentally innovate at the speed of battle with a sense of urgency to drive outcomes. And that sense of bringing teams together, solving big problems, and doing so in a mission-driven way that ultimately saved lives was something that I felt extremely passionate about. And so with the support of my local Rotary Club, actually, I went to graduate school to think about where I could continue to solve those types of problems. And I realized that working with nonprofits and working with small businesses was a place where I could do that. And I've worked across a variety of different spaces, but at the core of it, it's always been around the mission. How do you help small businesses, whether they're veterans who are trying to think about building new technologies that they didn't have when they were deployed, whether it's immigrants who are here on PhDs, building the future of technology and how do they scale those opportunities, or whether it's standing up new community programs like how do we enroll new folks in Medicaid and Medicare, and then make sure that they understand the way that they can access those services. That mission-driven problem solving has been at the core of who I am my entire life. And so my wife and I had our son in November of 24, just about 5 days after President Trump was reelected. And I remember the horror that I felt on Inauguration Day in 2017, watching Donald Trump get inaugurated while I was in Iraq, and to experience that again as a new father and be concerned about the onslaught and what ultimately became an assault on the senses, our common sense of decency, and our institutions, and our society's most vulnerable in January of 25, I knew that I could either get busy complaining, in which case, who's going to listen, or I could get busy doing something about it. And so I threw my hat into the ring, and I'm privileged to have done so. And we're running for your family just like we're running for my family. I want to work for you. I want to work for the people of NJ11, and I want to be that pragmatic problem solver who can take those principles forward in order to drive real results here in the district. And so, Erica and Stan, it's a privilege to be here today. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to raise our hand and attempt to serve. And I'm looking forward to the conversation and the questions.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Stan to start with the first set of questions.
Yeah, you're running to be one of 435 voting members of one House of Congress. That's power, but it's limited. So, A, realistically, what will you have the power to do as a U.S. representative, and what won't you have the power to do?
It's a great question. And I think fundamentally, it's important to remember that this election is actually a bellwether for what we hope will be a blue tsunami come November. And I think the NJ11 can send an incredibly strong sign to the country about the type of candidates and the type of government that they want to see in Washington starting in January. We'll be lucky enough to join in April to begin to lead that opposition, build that platform, and be that voice to articulate holding Trump and his cronies accountable at every single turn. So fundamentally, first, we've got to win back the House in order to really put ourselves back in power stand, to your point. The second thing that we need to do is that we need to remember why we're there. We need to be focused on the people of NJ11 and the results that they need, both from those who are able to freely and able participate, but also those who are most vulnerable. And we also need to be able to make sure that we understand that being in the opposition is more than just being about the challenge, but it's actually about how we can articulate what Americans are building for. And one of my favorite stories about how you change the dynamic of a big room where folks may feel a different way actually is from Barack Obama. He talks about being on the trail, going into a room in Greenville, South Carolina, and it had been raining. Everybody's in a bad mood. He got in a bad night of sleep. There's like 20 people, and he thought there'd be 100. And in the back of the room, one woman stands up when he says, "How's everybody doing?" And she says, "Fired up. And I'm ready to go." And at that moment, she said that the entire room broke out almost in unison with her. "Hey, we're fired up. We're ready to go." And he took that on the trail and he urged the point of remembering that one voice can change a room. One room can change a town hall. One town hall can change a city can change a state can change a nation. So if we remember that one of 435 is small but mighty, we could lead that opposition, we can articulate it with strength, and we can bring truth to power. So yes, we believe that there's opportunity here, and that's the power that we look to exhibit.
What skills does a congressperson need to be effective, and how have you demonstrated those skills?
So a long time ago, a mentor in the military told me, keep the main thing the main thing. And for me, just like I talked about before, that's service. That's putting people first. No matter what business, no matter what work, no matter what nonprofit efforts that you're supporting, directing, dedicating your life to, at the end of the day, this is about people. This is about people and the problems that they solve, that they face, excuse me. And our opportunity here is to take a pragmatic mindset, focus on the way that we can drive results, build that confidence that government delivers for them, and communicate that with vigor, with vision, and ultimately with a challenge to those that would erode those principles, those values, and that voice of those people. And so the skill sets that I bring, I believe, are both as a communicator, as a practical business leader, as a public servant in uniform. I want to draw on that mission first mentality, that get the job done mentality, and I want to take that forward to be that strong voice against Trump at every turn, to call out the challenges to the rule of law and the issues that we face every day, but also take it a step further to build a vision of where we can go. And I think those pieces, as both a team builder, a leader, and always a service first, people first individual, I can take those to Congress and we can articulate and build that momentum and that wave that we're talking about.
Thank you. Often in politics, donors, political bosses, other people with power will try to persuade you to prioritize their interests over those of your constituents. This could be by making you dependent on their money, having control over your career, or simply building relationships that make it hard to say no to your friends. What have you done or will you do to keep yourself free of these entanglements and protect against them unduly impacting your judgment?
So we talked a little bit about keeping the main thing, right? And for me, when you take office, you take an oath. So when I joined the service, took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. When I joined the reserves, I took that same oath. when I take this office, I will take that oath again. And for me, the main thing here is the people by which I am sent to Washington to serve. The title representative is not an accidental one, it is the priority. And so for that, I want to put the people of this district and the results that they deserve and that they need first and foremost. And so, how am I going to defend against that? I'm not taking corporate PAC money, but I also want to always challenge those who would speak out of both sides of their mouth. I think what terrifies and deeply concerns me is the dynamic that Trump and others in the MAGA Republican movement would take an oath of office and really mean it in such a hollow and frankly nihilistic way. We are there to serve the people. We are there to uphold. We are there to defend the Constitution, which is meant to build a community that's by, with, and for, and searching for that more perfect union. And that means that the work is never done. And the work is pushing forward and understanding that people's problems are what we're there in Washington to solve, not corporate problems. And so at the end of the day, we need to go to Washington. We need to hold the GOP accountable. We need to get big money out of politics. And we need to make the argument that this is about the people, the problems that they face, and the solutions that they need. And if we can articulate that forcefully, we can legislate to that agenda meaningfully, then I think we can build confidence in government in a meaningful way.
Okay, no one's perfect. It's my next question. No one's perfect, but we're looking for leaders who create a culture that holds themselves and those around them to high standards of responsible and ethical public service. For any leadership position you've held, could you think back to times when you realized, oh, there's a risk here that me or my staff might be tempted to abuse power or behave unethically? What measures did you put in place to prevent that from happening? Or if someone did slip up in your organization, what did you do to correct it as quickly as possible and make sure it never happened again?
Listen, no one's perfect. I've had many a coach, and my wife remind me that many times. So I think we do definitely try to take that constructive mentality. But I think at the heart of it, what you're asking, Stan, is no joking matter, right? Which is that people are policy. The choices that we make about the people that serve with us in order to serve this district are some of the most important decisions that the representative ultimately owns. And so you have to demand not just authenticity, but the highest integrity in the way that you show up and that you serve the people of this district. I've served in uniform under extraordinary circumstances, but I've also served in business as we've navigated challenges, everything from, um, how do you make payroll, to how do you build the business position. And the best thing that I've always found is that transparency wins. If you can over communicate, if you can build trust by sharing, then you can navigate those problems, those challenges in a meaningful way. It also helps you identify more quickly where there's points of friction. And as you identify those points of friction and you don't look the other way, but you call it out into conversation, you address the challenge, then you can meaningfully move to an answer. I think at the end of the day, ethics are a piece that we live by. Ethics are a piece that we set as an example, and they're a piece that we actually have to exude. And so leadership ultimately determines the direction. And I think it is right and just, frankly, to demand the highest of integrity of those who serve in positions of public trust. And we have seen time and time again, frankly, on the national stage, what happens when people who can't be trusted, who have twisted justifications and validations of why they serve, really not keeping the best interest of the people at heart. And that you see across the Trump administration. And frankly, that's been horrifying to watch play out. I want my son to grow up in a community where he can look up to those national leaders as public servants. And in the end, we have seen time and time again, folks across the Trump administration really serve at cross purposes to what might be best for the American people. And where there's opportunity to nip that in the bud, we will be that example, and we want to live those ethics every day.
Okay, turning it back to Erica.
Okay, we're going to go into some big picture questions. So our assumption is that we are in a time of attempted authoritarian takeover. Instead of politics as usual, we need to draw on the much deeper set of strategies that nonviolent civil resistance movements around the globe have used to reclaim their government when a ruler tries to insist that they get to do whatever they want with all the power and the money. First off, do you agree with this assessment? And if so, what do you think needs to happen to get us to a place where we have a healthy and functional democratic government?
So I think the first and foremost here is that Trump is absolutely acting with authoritarian tendencies. He is an authoritarian by wish. He is doing everything he can to bend the government, the norms, and institutions to his will at an unprecedented rate. I think it's become almost comical. And if the topic weren't so damn serious, it would be comical at how often he assaults the institutions, the norms, and the rule of law each and every day. And every American should be not just troubled, but terrified by what the implications of that are to a logical conclusion. Now, I don't think we can give in to despair, and we certainly can't give in to terror. And I won't let Trump or MAGA tell us what our America can be. Our America includes all of us. Our America is stronger for it. And we are enriched by the ability to disagree, to debate, and to have open conversation. I think to not call it what it is, which is authoritarianism in waiting, is a challenge to us to really prescribe what the solution is. And the solution to me is that we have to remember that institutions may be reliant on documents and law, but it is people that are charged with implementing them. And so, what does that mean? It means that we have to focus on good governance. It means that we need to focus on challenging authoritarian tendencies wherever they are. I mean, we have academics that are fleeing to Europe and people openly joking about the implications of speaking out against the administration as something that could have real punitive consequences, right? That chilling effect is real, it's felt. And where do you think it's most felt acutely? It's with the vulnerable. And so we have an obligation to every American across this community, in this national community, but also here in this district, to challenge that, meet it, and confront it. And the way that we do that is that we focus on good governance. We focus on winning elections, we focus on building that blue wave, and we focus on building and being that opposition that offers a vision of what America can be in the future and what we can all hobble in together as our own best hope to build that future each and every day, whether it's focusing on maintaining the rule of law, whether it's focused on maintaining the attention on each and every act that I think shocks the conscience of the country. It's focused on how do we drive alertness to that. And so, to your point, Erica, on how do we organize against it, I think we focus on the great grassroots work that organizations like SOMA have done, organizations like NJ11 have done, NJ11 for Change, excuse me, that can drive real meaningful electoral outcomes, but also build the community understanding across around what the impact and effects of these types of policy are, not just on every single New Jerseyan, but those, again, who are in those most acutely felt vulnerable populations. So yes, I think that we need to focus on those types of grassroots strategies. And B, I think you've seen how decisive the results can be when we effectively focus on them. Mikey Sherrill's 14-point win owes much of its credit to the efforts of grassroots organizations. That type of challenge gives confidence to those that are voting that they can change the direction of their government and that it can work for, by, and with them to address the problems that they face and that we all face.
What have you already done to promote having a functional democracy? And what would your role as a representative be?
So I think fundamentally, I talk a lot about how good governance is the way that we build confidence. You know, if you think about any sports team that you've been on, you never start with the big special play. You build competence. And as you build competence, that competence in the fundamentals gives you confidence to scale out and to deliver better. I think at the end of the day, what we need to be focused on is the way that we bring in the most people to the conversation. Now, leadership right now needs to be on getting the voter more informed, more educated, more involved. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're advocating for those folks, just like you and me, that are navigating challenges like everything from affordability and rent to healthcare, and pushing those pieces forward. In terms of what have I done on that side? This has been a passion of mine my entire life. I mean, even when I grew up in this district, actually find this hard to believe, but I wrote a letter to every single member of the House of Representatives and the Senate and every single member of the State Assembly, urging them to take on a youth advisory council in order to make sure that they could draw in perspectives of 15 to 25-year-olds. I think democracy is ultimately enriched by the more voices that we have in it. And so I've been working on that since I was a kid. And where I feel it needs to go today is that we need to meet voters where they are. And then we need to be able to deliver at the end of the day competence to build that confidence that not only can they be their best hope in voting for what they believe in, but that government that they elect can ultimately deliver for what they need.
One of the reasons we think our country is so vulnerable to authoritarianism right now is that we've spent decades concentrating wealth in the hands of a few, while ordinary people become less and less able to meet their basic needs. While you don't have the power to single-handedly change that, what do you think we should be working toward in terms of ensuring that everyone can meet their basic needs and wealth isn't too concentrated?
So number one, I couldn't agree more. I think it's simply concerning. If you look at wage trends from the Second World War to today, after the Second World War, typically line workers were making about a 20th of what CEOs or those in the C-suite would be making. If you carried those trends out and adjusted them for cost of living to today, it'd be over 200 times at the C-suite compared to a line worker. Not to mention the fact that many folks that are in places like fulfillment centers and other areas like that have to work two jobs to make ends meet. And in a lot of ways are challenged that they have to take from the food assistance programs in order to provide food for their family and basic needs. To me, that's a fundamental failure. It's also a reflection of what I've come to really call the calcified Gilded Age, which is that we are becoming so brittle in the way that folks are making ends meet and how the top 1% of earners continue to charge ahead, that we are setting ourselves up for a system that is prone to tip over. And if that happens, it'll have fundamental consequences for the global economy and fundamental consequences for folks across this state, this district, and this country. We can't allow that or accept that as a consequence. That brittle nature of that calcified Gilded Age needs to be changed. We need to advocate for fair taxes. We need to advocate for fair chances, and we need to advocate for fair play. If you look at the fact that you talk to any neighbor, talk to any family, talk to any friend who lives in this district, people are fundamentally sick and tired of being sick and tired. They feel like the system's canted against them. They feel like the system's not working for them. And everything from tax policy to social needs policy to social assistance policies are canted around why they shouldn't have access. I think we need to be asking, how do we reset the table? How do we think about, in a meaningful way, the way that we can get those fair taxes, we can provide those fair chances, and we can establish a framework that enables fair play and equity of opportunity across this great country. When we provide that equity of opportunity, we enable others to thrive. When others thrive, the entire country is able to succeed. And so I'm deeply concerned about that concentration of wealth. I would urge common sense mechanisms like stopping stock trading by members of Congress as a way to install immediate confidence in the way that we are focused on the problems at hand. And I would urge us to reevaluate, reconsider, and ultimately charge forward on this fair taxes, fair chances, fair play agenda.
Throughout U.S. history, one of the most potent weapons deployed to stop efforts to broadly distribute wealth has been stoking racism. Historically, this has included dividing and conquering rebellions against plantation owners, breaking union attempts to challenge factory owners, persuading municipalities to destroy public goods like pools rather than share them, and persuading ordinary people to cut their own healthcare and social safety nets as long as it means those people don't get any. What will you or your allies do to counter this dynamic when it gets deployed to try to block the goals you just talked about?
I'm a fundamental believer that that little phrase that's written on every single coin across this country, e pluribus unum, out of many one, is a promise. It's a promise because it recognizes the true potential of this country when we are all included, when we all see our future in this boat to row to the horizon that is both brighter, that is better, and that is more fair. The othering that occurs and the fear mongering helps no one but those in power. It helps no one but that top 1% of that brittle, calcified, Gilded Age, like we talked about. And so for me, I have long been an advocate that the more people we include, the broader the coalition, the bigger the tent, the better that we are able to draw upon the strength in those differences and charge forward. And I think we have to call out the dog whistle attempts at racism. We have to call out the times where folks are misaligned, misidentified, or pushed to the side. We all do well when we all have a chance, a fair chance, and a fair play to get there. And what we have to be able to focus on is the way that we move from the conversation of us and them to we. When we work together, anything that we want to accomplish is possible. We've seen that in the absolutely tireless efforts of the civil rights organizers in the 60s, but we've also seen that same degree of inspiration and that grit here in the grassroots movement, okay, I think across NJ11. And by drawing folks and seeing that your cause and my cause are the same, and that we both thrive when there's a fair chance and fair opportunity, that to me is the future. We're all in this boat. So we can all be grabbing an oar and rowing together, or we can pretend that we're going to dive out into the ocean and our life vest might carry us. And I just refuse to believe that anybody should be thrown out. We need to be focused incredibly on how we draw together, especially during these challenging times.
Another major barrier to progressive change has been the right wing exploiting people's fear of being harmed, particularly their fear of experiencing violence in their own home or community, to scare voters away from inclusive policies. To counter this, we need to adequately address people's safety fears. What do you think works to keep people safe, and what do you see as the federal government's role in promoting that?
I think communities move at the speed of trust. I think all things move at the speed of trust. I spent a lot of time in the military and when I was working in policy, focused around how do you, there's this thing in the military called stability operations, right? Which is how do you establish stability across post-conflict areas, right? So areas that had just experienced war. Well, the challenge is that legitimacy and stability ultimately come through trust. And so if we think about the challenges that we faced on everything from navigating the mental health crisis to community policing to education, the stoking of fear comes down to a lack of trust. And a lack of trust is often built on what is perceived a lack of competence. And so I think what we need to be focused on is the right way of enriching by experiencing one another's perspectives. And where the right wing may call out, there's a challenge to an othering, and that is an area of fear, I would encourage folks to see from one another's perspective. There is an opportunity here to build trust by thinking about, considering, and frankly, evangelizing the challenges that different communities face. And I think a lot about the Maya Angelou poem where she talks about, I've traveled the 7 continents and the 7 seas, but I've never met that ordinary man. And my friend, we are more common, we are more alike than we are different. And I think the more that we can draw upon that type of inspiration, and we can install policy around this idea that we are enriched by viewing perspective of others, and that our challenges, your family, Erica's, Stan's family, my family, are all rather similar, that enables us to focus on where we can converge, and then we can put competent solutions to build that confidence and build that trust to reestablish the way that we see one another as all being part of this great community.
How do we counter attempts to use fear about safety to justify harm against immigrants, trans people, people of color, and other vulnerable groups?
I think there's an evangelizing and frankly, a dynamic of like telling the facts as they are. You know, when you actually control for a lot of the statistics across what the rate of crime is amongst any of these populations, I mean, the narrative that the right wing pushes versus what is actually true in the data are absolutely not true. The congruence is not there. The incongruence is what emerges. And what the right wing has done is they've simplified and they've aggrandized and they've twisted basic facts into simple stories that are wrong, that are hurtful, that are prejudicial. And I think the challenge has been the Democrats at the national level have yet to kind of make that argument, to call out those numbers, but also to address that there's a trust valley. And if we can meet people where they are, understand that if they feel unsafe, that lack of feeling of safety is more about trust than it is about any particular group. Then we can, I think, reestablish and build, because that trust cuts both ways, right? It's a two-way street. So we have to work across both those communities that are vulnerable and that are often othered, and we have to work to bring them in. We have to be inclusive. We have to be a community. We have to work together. And I think fundamentally, we have to also stick to the facts. And the facts are that there is no data to support any degree of the wild, unabashed, brazen claims that the right-wing MAGA extremists have applied to these great, loving, inclusive, meaningful communities. And I think we need to tell the story and speak truth to power. And we need to overemphasize the way that if we pull in and row together, that we can all thrive. And that safety is a feeling that is mutually built through mutual trust.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Stan for our last set of questions.
Yes, we're going to get into issue-specific questions. Could you tell us about times where you've supported immigrants, even when doing so might be risky?
So for me, you know, my grandmother immigrated here in 1953 from Ireland with nothing. She was in Delaware. She worked as a house servant, actually, for the DuPont family. And for me, immigration is the great American story. We're all here from somewhere else, but in search of a very similar thing, which is how do we better provide, how do we better build, and how do we achieve what may be our version of our American dream? And I think that there's a beauty, and I think that there's a strength, and there's a grit in that. When I served in the 82nd, there were folks that had been in America since the Mayflower, but there were also immigrants in our ranks who had chosen to uphold the same ideals that I had raised my right hand to defend. And at the end of the day, I continue to see that in the reserves. Oftentimes, I have seen that immigrants are most hungry to pursue and to personify those ideals that we hold dear. The right to pursue, the right and the ability to pursue our happiness, to provide for our family, and to get that fair shake. And so I put my life on the line right alongside immigrants every day, whether it was in training, jumping out of aircraft, which I wasn't so crazy to be doing all the time, and in combat. And I have seen what it is. We're all cut of the same cloth. We all believe in these same ideals. And many times the immigrants that I have had the privilege to work with have personified those ideals even greater than one could have possibly imagined. And so I'm lucky, and I count myself lucky to have served with, to have worked with, and to live alongside immigrants in our community even to this day.
Have you advocated for the Immigrant Trust Act at the state level?
It's a great question. So, I mean, first and foremost, this is a federal office. And so the responsibility in this office is to legislate comprehensive immigration reform. The fact that New Jersey and California have had to navigate these questions on their own, frankly, I believe is an abdication of the federal government to meaningfully and responsibly address the challenge of a modern immigration infrastructure that supports the greatest resource that this country has, which is its people. So I want to emphasize that, because I think it's important that those who are seeking to get this office in order to represent the interests of this district understand that this is a national problem and a national failure to accommodate and enable legal, effective, and scalable immigration that provides for communities to feel safety and move at that speed of trust. At the state level, I've been very clear to try to push state leaders to offer more clarity on exactly where they stand. The Immigration Trust Directive under the Murphy administration has been upheld in the courts. The courts have been very clear that the anti-commandeering discretion or direction is a piece that the federal government cannot direct the state governments to bend to their will on all of these different policies. At the end of the day, the ITA ultimately unifies a whole of government approach to what the ITD already lays out. And I think we need to be clear about the ways in which those pieces are congruent. And again, they get back to what we were talking about, which is building at that speed of trust. If you have that trust, you can get folks to identify more serious crimes. You can get them to be more healthy and participating in medical care, and you get them to be more vibrant and collective members of that society, our community. But at the end of the day, this is a federal election. And I do think comprehensive immigration reform helps address and ultimately solves the problem of the ITA by addressing this at a federal level and making sure that every single immigrant across this entire country gets the benefit of trust, gets the benefit of the hard work and the fruits of their labor, and puts us into a position where we remember and we put first that people are our greatest resource here in this country.
So that takes us to the next question. Could you tell us about times where you've supported trans and other LGBTQIA plus people, even when doing so was risky?
So I grew up son of a social worker. And as a son of a social worker, you're exposed to all different communities and especially vulnerable communities. And I fundamentally believe that everyone should be able to live as who they are. They should be free to love who they love, and that happy people are fulfilled people, and fulfilled people build vibrant, meaningful, supportive, and successful communities. I learned that as a kid. I saw that and have seen that as an adult. And I've been an advocate of this for as long as I can remember. And there's one particular case that sticks out in my mind. When I was deployed forward, I was an advisor, like I mentioned. And so that work took me on into the old city in Mosul quite a bit. You're probably wondering, how does this, what does this have to do with LGBTQIA plus? The best medic in the battalion was a trans man. That medic was the most competent, the most effective, and a person who you knew was going to have your back no matter what. No one was concerned in that time that they were trans. No one was concerned at that time about anything other than the fact that they were competent, that they were dedicated to the mission, and that they were going to look out for me when I needed them most. And so I think about my life, both in terms of how I was raised, what I've experienced, and I come back again and again to that point. Folks need to be free to be who they are. Our communities thrive when folks can be, at the end of the day, who they believe themselves to be in their heart of hearts. And we are all more successful as a result of that.
Okay, could you give examples of when you have prioritized climate action, even though there were competing priorities?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think amidst all of this assault on the census from this administration, I think one of our greatest, most urgent challenges has really been lost at times in the discussion. And I think that that's deeply concerning. And we see it already on our shores just here in New Jersey, which is climate change. And for me, ever since I exited the military, I knew that I wanted to be focused on mission-driven small businesses that were solving big problems. I've had the chance to work with wind companies. I've had the chance to work on economic development strategies around green energy. I actually worked with the Nevada governor's office in order to help them build out a plan for how to drive both green research around lithium-enabled technologies, enable a inclusive and comprehensive lithium mining strategy to bring in more mines, but also connect that lithium mining to next generation green technology in order to meet our climate goals, not just at the state level in Nevada, but more broadly across the entire country. And so I think climate change is a direct threat to our most vulnerable populations. I think climate change is a direct threat to this planet. It's a direct threat to our economic prosperity, and it's a direct threat to our national security. And so when I talk about small businesses attacking big problems, climate change has always been at the top of my list. And I've had the privilege of working alongside entrepreneurs, union workers, state public officials to think about, contemplate, and activate the right types of strategies moving forward to address um, both in the near term, but build for the long term strategies, means, and mechanisms to turn back the tide on climate change.
How have you prioritized diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organizations, and more broadly, even when it's been under attack?
DEI is one of those topics where I'm not quite sure what everyone's so scared about. The dynamic here is around how do we get enriched by experience? The dynamic here is about how do I better know my neighbor? How am I supposed to think about the ways in which I can be welcoming, that my family and your family can thrive together in the community that we find ourselves in, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in a softball or little league? We are always better when we step outside of ourselves and think about both the challenges that we face and the challenges that you face. I think what we're really talking about is understanding the way in which we think about the playing field, we think about our relation to it, but we think about our neighbors, other families, other friends, and how they relate to it. And I think we have to advocate for the central idea that we are not weaker by opening our minds, providing opportunities, bringing people forward to the table, but we're actually enriched by that. And so across every single walk of my life, from the military to nonprofits, to my time in graduate school, to small businesses, I fundamentally believe that we're enriched by looking outside of ourselves and bringing different perspectives onto our teams, into our homes, and across our communities. So I'm a strong advocate for this, and I believe fundamentally, back to that e pluribus unum, out of many we are one, and we have to not just think about that as a slogan, but as a promissory note to those in our communities around us, both like us and different from us, and remember that we are strengthened and enriched by that.
What do you support doing to make health care accessible and affordable for everyone, including vaccines, contraception, abortion care, gender-affirming care? Make that accessible and affordable. What would you support?
So I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we face. We talk a lot about affordability, but what we're really talking about is, I think, a select few real topics. And right at the top of that is healthcare. Not only is it under attack from the convoluted, complicated system and the costs at the heart of it, but it's also under attack from the ideology of the right wing that's trying to push a perspective into health that's not backed by facts, that's not backed by public health, and it's put us into a position where ideology is winning over science, and that can't be. But also, you need to be able to provide that care, to your question, Stan. And what I was really disappointed around was that, frankly, the National Democrats effectively snatched a few jaws of victory last government shutdown. There was a moment where the wind was in the sails and the compromise and the win that we needed in order to extend and make available ACA subsidies to continue to keep costs down as we are able on ACA was defeated and really meaningless and kind of not with a bang, but with a whimper. And as a result, your family, my family, families across this community are going to be confronted with increasing costs that are almost impossible to imagine. Murphy administration put out an estimate that it'll be about 174% increase in ACA subsidies per family. I don't know about you, but I don't typically carry around a calculator to do that math. So what does that mean in dollars and cents? It means about $2,700 per person per year on average for families across New Jersey. If you're a family of four, it's almost $12,000 a year. If you're a working family or you're a family that's working two jobs to try to make ends meet, that is a back-breaking cost. So we need to be focused on ACA tax credits. We need to be focused on creating confidence through clarity in this case. The system should not be as convoluted, as complicated as it is. We need to be able to actually enable folks to receive, understand, and then navigate their way to the care that they deserve at a cost that is reasonable, affordable, and supported by the government. I've had family members that are navigating chronic mental health challenges. You want to talk about an industry as well that's deeply, deeply profitable. Even if you have insurance, in a lot of cases, folks are taking themselves off the insurance markets and saying that they're now only private care. Well, that means that if you're somebody who's navigating a serious mental illness, you're now going to be paying $300 to $400 out of pocket per session, in addition to whatever medication that you require to manage the challenges that you face. That's an untenable outcome. That's an untenable solution. And in the end, it hurts our communities and it hurts our most vulnerable. It adds to the challenges that we see across folks that face homelessness, folks that are faced with drastic choices. And it leads back, Erica, to the question that you asked around feelings of perceived safety. All of this is connected. Failing to address, expand, and enable ACA means that we are failing communities, not just here in NJ11, but across the whole country. And so I would emphatically support expanding ACA tax credits, and I would emphatically be against the ideology being pushed into public health policy that we've seen on everything from vaccines to the use by Republicans of a backdoor here to take a compromise and push the limiting and eroding of abortion rights and access into the ACA tax credits. Democrats at the national level need to hold the line because there are implications here for every family across this district and mine as well that I refuse to accept. I think many across this community would refuse to accept.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't covered?
The number one point I'd like to say, Stan and Erica, is I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you both today. I think much of the change that we've seen and much of this reality of, we are our own best hope is exuded by grassroots groups like yours. It reminds us that we have the grit to get through fear, to bring up hope, and to drive towards solutions. And I think that's what I would like to leave with everybody here today, which is that I want to be a problem solver. I want to work every single day for your family like I work for mine. And I want to drive solutions back here that build confidence and that ultimately enable us to prosper and find success in one another in our community, so that we can better deliver for this whole country. There's a lot of challenges in that path, but I'm excited to start the work and I'm honored to be in this fight with you. And I'm looking forward to working with you both as this chapter continues to unfold. So thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your vision for the New Jersey's 11th Congressional District.
Thanks again, guys. Have a great weekend. Stay warm out there.
You too.